Mhm. Hi, everyone. I'm Fatumata. I'm the co-founder of Ninty, and I'm so excited to have you all here and have Patricia to share more about breathing techniques and the importance of breathing. So first of all, before sharing more about Patricia, I would like with Olga to share more about Ninty. So Ninty is a one-stop digital health solution for moments that matters that we're building based in cooked by heart based in Paris, but for people all over the world and women everywhere. So we offer education tailored healthcare supports by connecting women to specialists and guiding them in the best healthcare choices possible. We do believe that we need to bring Ninty within the employer space, and we believe that employers can better support their employees. And by offering our services, we thrive for a better well-being for women everywhere and try to achieve truly equal women's health as a priority.
And hi, everyone. So I'm Olga. I'm a co-founder of Ninty, and together with Patumata, we are so pleased to have Patricia on board with us today. So Patricia, we are very happy to count you as one of our practitioners. And I will be very short, but basically just saying thank you and introducing Patricia very quickly. And then obviously, Patricia, you can tell us a little bit more about yourself. How did you come with this journey and why you are doing this in the first place? So Patricia is actually a licensed physical therapist, and she's also an author of Wise Woman's Guide to Your Healthiest Pregnancy and Birth. She's the founder of Wise Body Physical Therapy, and she previously co-founded the Kima Center for Physiotherapy and Wellness. And she's based in New York, I think. But she can, please, Patricia, tell us a little bit more where you're dialing in from, and a little bit more on your background. And I'm looking forward to learn a lot about the breathing techniques and how we can use us to help us in our sexually reproductive healthcare journeys. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really feeling so honored and blessed to be here and being able to speak to this community and all the women that are trying to amplify their health. So I am a licensed physical therapist in New York, practicing since 1999. Before that, I was a professional dancer. So I got into physical therapy naturally because I was around injury my whole life. And I, at the time in 99, believe it or not, my the professional dancers I was working with, the Rockettes, Broadway shows, American Ballet Theater, modern dance companies, and women were starting to come back after pregnancy, which was a really exciting time. Before, they used to retire and just hang up their hats and just say, okay, whatever, I'm done and I'll just teach. Now they were coming back. And this then started to happen amongst Olympic athletes, amongst professional athletes, tennis players, and the like, which I happen to work with. So this whole now fervor to try to help support the woman on this motherhood journey, even at the elite athlete or professional dance level, started to happen. So my boss turned to me and said, hey, would you like to help these women? Because we don't know what to do with them. This is the first time this is happening. And so I started taking courses all around the world and certifications and trying to support these women. And we did really well. You know, they're doing great. And it's such a fantastic time. You know, I always tell moms, it's a tough journey. You need a lot of support. You have to do a couple of really key things well, and then you're great. Like, why not? You could do it all. So of course, after working with this population, many women were saying to me, Patricia, could you just like put this down somehow in a book or a pamphlet so I could share it with my friends so that I can remember for the next time I get pregnant? There's so much I've learned from you. And it was like hundreds of people asked me to write a book. So I ended up getting a book deal and writing a book. So this is the Wise Woman's Guide to Your Healthiest Pregnancy and Birth. And that's me dancing, jumping, which I do not recommend, but that's my 9-pound baby 14 years ago. So that's a famous dance photographer that I am friendly with through the dance world that wanted to take photos of me. And little did I know it was going to become the cover of a book. So you can do it all. And what I was finding was that a lot of my patients that were just going through chronic pain, were just going through ailments, repeat injuries, maybe they were pregnant, maybe they were completely not pregnant, maybe they were a man, maybe they were a woman, we're just kind of having sometimes some cyclical issues like over and over again, even though we were rehabbing and getting them pain-free. And I knew there was a missing link to my practice. So I then became certified in behavioral breathing. So I'm a behavioral breathing analyst, where I actually use a capnography machine, which I have a photo of later, where we actually analyze what's happening. You know, how are you oxygenating? How much carbon dioxide are you blowing off? Are you having any issues that could be linked to a breathing dysfunction? When we're in pain, we get breathing dysfunctions. When we are pregnant, we have breathing dysfunctions. So it's very important to talk about this piece. And I found that it was really fascinating how little people understood of the link between their breathing and health. And so I actually have done some breathing analysis for injury prevention, but also for just analysis. And I did this once with the WTA. And granted, it was during a Grand Slam. And if I tell you 80% of the women during that tournament had a breathing dysfunction. And these are elite athletes. So it's very, very prevalent. And I think it's a really easy, not always easy, but most of the time, a couple of things you can tweak in your life that could be instrumental to making you feel better. So that's kind of what we're going to be diving into today. So I will share my screen for my presentation, and I will be going through a lot of different aspects of this. I'll be diving deep, but we're going to use this presentation as a reference. I'm going to talk a little more about real world applications to this breathing. Oh, and I didn't say that I happen to be a mom. I've had a 9-pound birth of the one that was on the cover here. He was 9 pounds and I had not even an ounce of medication. Then I had a C-section, and then I had a vaginal birth after cesarean. So I can talk about all 3 types of birth and how the body can potentially heal a little bit differently. I'm also part of the first ever early return to exercise following C-section in postpartum for women. And that's with Weill Cornell and HSS here in New York, 2 very prestigious hospital and educational bodies. And so we just had a very successful pilot study, and now we're into the larger study with 600 women. So we're really excited about that. So, why isn't it advancing? Hold on 1 minute, guys. Okay, I'll just have to use the bottom one. So if you see the picture on the right, the drawing, that gray shaded area at the bottom of your ribs is your diaphragm. And when we diaphragmatically breathe, we actually, that's kind of more the involuntary state of breathing, where you have a very, very smart reflex that kicks in to tell you how much air you should take in and how much air you should blow off. When we get into an inefficient breathing pattern, maybe we have a trigger, maybe something's gone on in our life, we've been through a trauma, maybe we just had a baby, you sometimes lose connection with that really innate wise reflex to diaphragmatically breathe. And that starts some trouble. So, but did you know that how you breathe can actually affect your mental health, your physical health, your metabolism, your respiratory chemistry, your immune system, and of course, your energy levels? When we breathe efficiently, we tend to have a calmer mind. We can actually engage our core muscles better. We could have a balanced pelvic floor tone so that we don't leak urine. And we tend to feel better. We also stay in the moment. You know, when people say, oh, I'm always like scatterbrained and I barely remember what I did today. Maybe you weren't present because you have a slight breathing dysfunction. That can happen, we dissociate. So what do we want? What's efficient breathing? When we measure it, similar to your blood pressure, you know, we say like 120, less than or equal to 120 over 80. We want your expiration, right? Your end tidal CO2, your carbon dioxide that you blow off, to be roughly 35 to 45 millimeters of mercury of pressure. We measure this with a capnograph that you see right there. She's hooked up to a nasal cannula that hooks up into the machine, that hooks up into my computer, that shows all the almost like a EKG scan, and it shows you how well you're breathing and what your chemistry is like. Now, as I mentioned in my intro, 100% of pregnant women have a breathing dysfunction. Some people are floored by that. They're like, what? But honestly, the baby takes up so much real estate that you can't actually access your diaphragm well. So you have to compensate. And in my book, I talk a lot about breathing techniques and strategies and positions that can help you get a little bit more of an advantage so you compensate to the best of your ability. But if you're noticing I'm really exhausted all the time and all of these things when you're breathing, it may not be the food. It might, during pregnancy, it might not be the food, it might be your breathing. We also may go between breathing decently, like being okay for part of the day, and then not being okay. And why? Because we might actually have triggers. So what are these triggers like? There's a huge list here that you can look at later, but some of the things are like, let's say you're at a job that isn't very supportive for you, and hopefully Ninti is helping there. But let's say your boss is harping down your throat, like, I need this yesterday, come on, and every time you go to work, you're like, huh. It's like a bear has entered the room. We don't breathe correctly. We literally can have an inefficient breathing pattern in an environment. Then you go home and maybe your home life is great, so you breathe much more easily, much more efficiently, or vice versa. At work, you're great, and at home, not so good. So we want to try to understand how we feel in the places. How about the people that you're around, right? We rise to the occasion when we're around our loved ones, people that we really love hanging out with. We breathe really well because we're so happy to be around them, and it makes the experience more vivid than when you're around someone you don't like. Maybe you want to dissociate, you don't want to remember that, so you breathe really poorly. But the effects of that poor breathing habit may last into hours, and that's a really big problem. Sometimes it's just a challenge, like you're taking a test, you're public speaking, maybe it's going on airplanes, maybe you are having a response to discomfort, pain. So these are just kind of a few things to consider when you realize, like, am I breathing well or not? So what are some symptoms that you may be experiencing if you're not breathing correctly? Well, clearly, like shortness of breath or chest pain or chest tightness. Believe it or not, there are so many calls to 911. And a good portion of them are due to an unexplained breathing habit. Like when people say, oh my God, I swore I was having a heart attack, but then they told me I was fine. Then they just sent me home with a muscle relaxant. It's usually, you can create almost the same symptoms of a heart attack if you're in a anxious state of breath. You can get numbness, heart palpitations, anxiety, huge one. Stress, fatigue, weakness, exhaustion, like really just kind of that fatigue at some point in the day. Nausea, right? Some women last with their nausea for so many months. Sometimes it's their breathing dysfunction and not just morning sickness. Blurred vision, confusion. And really one of my favorites is the inability to focus. People will say, I can't focus, and everybody says I'm okay, but I just can't, and I can't remember things, and noticing few things. So this is a over breathing strategy. Basically, you're blowing off too much carbon dioxide, creating almost an air hunger for more oxygen. And then you have this vicious cycle where you're not normalizing how much carbon dioxide should be left in the reserves of your lung. Okay, so we're going to go through that. So just some statistics for you. Tens of millions of people worldwide suffer with the profound and misunderstood symptoms and deficits of learned dysfunctional breathing habits. In patient populations, anyone that's seeing a medical practitioner, we can see an incidence as great as 60 to 90% of the population. Otherwise, just in general, they are averaging 10 to 25% of the population. So this is very vast. So the diaphragm is the primary inspiratory muscle, okay? We use the diaphragm to breathe, and when you stay connected to that diaphragm, as I mentioned earlier, you will have more availability for the appropriate oxygenation and CO2 expulsion that we're looking for. So when, you think about someone who has had an asthma attack, they often are told, take a paper bag and breathe into the paper bag. And I never really understood that. Like, wait a minute, they're like, can't catch their breath. They like need more oxygen. What are you doing putting a paper bag around their mouth? After I did my certification, which took me over years, I understood that what's happening is you're actually blowing off too much CO2. Your internal state of your lungs are going, oh crap, I need a certain level of carbon dioxide pressure in my lungs so they don't collapse, right? So like a pneumothorax, like somebody like, you get a puncture wound or something and your lung could deflate and collapse, right? We need a certain amount of pressure, that 35 to 45 millimeters of mercury of pressure, to not have that lung drop. So when you blow off too much, your body says, uh-oh, I need more CO2, sucks all this oxygen in. Then the body goes, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. You took in too much. I can't do this. And it blows it off again, and then again, and then again. And then you're like not even able to contact your diaphragm because the body is just in this huffing and puffing mode. When you put a bag around your mouth, or my quick bag, because you might not have a bag around, is this, or your mask, right? Everybody has a mask now. So like this, you're forcing your body, when you suck that oxygen back in, to actually take in some of the carbon dioxide that you just blew off. So what does that do? It starts to restore the reserves back in the lung, so you don't have that vicious cycle that you might be stuck in. All right. So when we breathe through our nose and not our mouth, because that mouth breathing is terrible, we actually can get and make nitric oxide. Why is this so important? Because it's an actual vasodilator. It decreases clotting. So many women clot when they're pregnant. Now that needs medication. You have to get the support you need, but if you have a breathing dysfunction on top of it, it's a problem. So by doing proper breathing, you can actually amplify your chances of having your hemoglobin not have that affinity to that oxygen, and really spread it out so that you do not end up having any sort of issues there. There is a Nobel Peace Prize that was awarded for the benefits of nitric oxide. You can see here some of the data around nitric oxide. So when we talk about this, the effects, like what happens when we're in that state where we're over breathing, right? And it might not look like an asthma attack. So you might actually be breathing out too much CO2 and sucking all this air back in slightly on a subtle level and not even knowing that you're doing it. But you might see some of these or feel some of these things. Now, this is kind of getting geeky on you guys, okay? So like antioxidant reduction, like kidneys, bronchial constriction, what happens with calcium and magnesium, gut smooth muscle constriction. That is kind of like, some people will say, I have IBS. Well, what if you're stuck in a really bad breathing habit and you're actually getting the effects of that poor breathing habit on your gut smooth muscle? And it's creating all of that irritability in there. It's fascinating how vast the improvements can be when you get your breathing right. Again, more things, but here I like to highlight tissue inflammation. So, like when we're feeling inflamed, the number one way to have a healthy baby is to reduce your inflammation in your body. So by breathing correctly, you can really help that. And then, this whole thing about, oh, I want to be alkaline, I want to be, decrease my acidity, all of these kind of, new waters and, diets to not be acidic. Well, when we breathe appropriately, we can change that whole spectrum. So these are just some journal quotations on the huge effects of the physiology by breathing improperly. This is talking about, again, a lot of the physiological effects, your hemoglobin, your reduced oxygen, how glucose resources change in your cellular level. I mean, it is vast. And then some long-term effects of being in this chronic state of not being in the right pH because you're breathing improperly. And again, of course, the blood clotting and some connective tissue compromises. This is a very wild slide about a CAT scan on a brain. And this is what it looks like, all lit up on the left with activity and oxygenation. And then on the right, this is just minutes after being in a hyperventilation state. And we have a 60% reduction of oxygen in just minutes. So no wonder why we can't think, right? And I always talk about the bear in the room, right? Like you're like walking around, all of a sudden a bear comes in front of you and you just go. Are you thinking of your to-do list? Are you going to stop over to your friend's house? Are you going to eat a sandwich? Are you going to have sex? No. If you are stressed out, your body only has one thing. It shuts down the brain and you just go. Okay, it's a very fight and flight response. So when we're improperly breathing, it may actually affect, besides affecting our sex drive, may actually affect all of the natural healthy processes in our body and keep us disconnected with the right processes to, let's say, be fertile, right? Like that's where you can even draw a crazy wild link. And this is here just to show you what it looks like when I look at your breathing. Where we see all of this like EKG activity. These arrows are different things that can happen. Like, are you holding your breath? Are you exhaling too soon? Like you didn't take enough inhale in? Are you exhaling too much? Are you gasping? Are you having irregular breathing where you're like inhaling, exhaling, then inhaling a little extra, exhaling a little extra, like doing these little like pieces? It should actually look like a sinusoidal curve, almost like a shark fin, you know, almost like this, closely where that blue arrow is, the light blue arrow is. This is something I give to my patients. And this is an exercise in how you can first observe your breathing to see if it's a problem. And then what can you do about it? And we're going to talk about that now. So, you know what? Here are some references for you. And this is a page on how to get in touch with me. And if you do want to get your breathing analyzed as well as potentially corrected so it's really right for you, there's a wonderful service on Breathing Science Network where you can, and the link, the URL is here in the middle. That is where you can actually rent the capnography machine and work with someone virtually all around the world for getting the right cues for you, the right breathing strategy, the right exercises that are individualized for you. And then there's, you know, plenty of wonderful things we can do over telehealth for sure. So I'm going to stop my share right now, and then we're going to have some fun